You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as BITVOL, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use BITVOL Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time once again for the Crypto Rundown, the program here on the Options Insider Radio Network, where we go beyond the traditional realm of Apple and SPY and VIX options and all the other fun stuff you folks like to talk about on the network, Tesla, you name it, out there, the meme stocks. And we go into the world of crypto, going to talk the spot, the futures, the options, the volatility, the SKEW, the OI, all that good stuff, and a whole bunch more. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the aforementioned network. Reminding you, if you like what you hear at this show, anything else we do on the network throughout the week, keep rating and reviewing it wherever you get our content. It's not available on just about every major platform under the sun these days. It does help new folks continue to discover the content, particularly for a show like this. It's so unique. There's no one else out there really talking about the intersection of crypto and derivatives. It's kind of still a very nascent marketplace. And also, B, we see a lot of new listeners coming to this show from outside the world of options who don't really understand maybe or know a lot about the world of options, in which case, if that's you, subscribe to the full network, because we have shows like Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook Radio that will really help explain this marketplace to you in a lot more detail. And of course, keep those questions and comments coming. We do love to hear from all of you out there. Let's see who we're hearing from on the old program today. I do believe we are joined once again on the old Crypto Rundown program by our old friend, Mr. Simon Ho, the CEO over there at T3 Index and the creator of one or two volatility products. Mr. Simon, are you awake, sir, across the pond?
I am indeed awake and raring to go.
This show is a little bit easier for you, a little bit better time for you than Vol Views, is it not?
Yes, it is.
We get a little bit more awake version of Simon on this show. He's beaming it all the way from Sydney, listeners. So a little bit of a time differential as we kick off the Bitcoin Breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown, the portion of the program where we break down what the heck's going on in the world of the world's leading digital asset. Of course, we're talking about Bitcoin. And before we even get to all that fun stuff, Simon, you were on not too long ago and we chatted about what you've been working on. Of course, you've created a lot of other volatility products like spikes, which we talk about a lot on Volatility Views, and other products out there. The milkshake index, the infamous milkshake index. But you have been dabbling in the world of crypto and have indeed created your BITVOL index. I know you have some news on that front. We'll get to that in a second. But first, let's start off. It's been a little bit, and we have an influx of new listeners all the time on this program. Give us a quick recap, a quick rehash for our newer listeners. What the heck is BITVOL? What are you doing, sir?
Yeah, sure. So everybody's very familiar with the VIX and what an amazing tool that is and how popular it is. And so it stood to reason to us to think that we should try and create something, a corollary of that, but in the Bitcoin space. Bitcoin obviously has attracted a lot of attention and continues to grow, and it's quite an amazing, very fertile area. So we set about trying to create something that was analogous to the to the VIX index, but on crypto. So that's not necessarily easy to come by because all of the exchanges are distributed around the world, different time zones. You know, there's no sort of central thing like there is with a regular sort of exchange. So there is, you know, each exchange has, to a varying degree, good or poor quality data. So the data was the real issue for us, was to try and find good quality data, which we did. And from that, then you can build a reliable index. So we've been actually running we run two indices, two volatility indices. One is on the Bitcoin and the other is on Ethereum. So one is the BITVOL index and the other one is the ETHVOL index. So we have these pumping in real time on places like Refinitiv, and we also pump it directly to folks who want to receive it. And soon we'll be putting it on Bloomberg as well. But yeah, it's fascinating. You mentioned, you know, a trade that was done last week. I'm sure we'll get into that at some point on the show, but that garnered so much attention relative to other stuff that we've done. It was quite simply shocking. So there's obviously a lot of interest in products like this.
Yeah, you know, you mentioned the words Bitcoin these days and volatility, Simon. You kind of hit the two magic words. You sprinkle a little bit of VIX in there as well, and you got all the magic things. All you're missing is Tesla. Can you somehow incorporate Tesla into Simon? Then you get all of it. Maybe GameStop as well. Can you rope GameStop in there as well?
I'll try.
Yeah, well, like I mentioned, you had big news. We kind of touched on it on Volatility Views, but this program kind of speaks to a little bit different audience, even though there is some overlap there as well. I know a lot of the options hardcores, even those who are pretty resistant to the world of crypto, have started to dip their toes into the crypto waters, at least looking to learn more and listening to a show like this. But yeah, you came on the show not too long ago, Simon. You kind of mentioned this index. It was still very new. You mentioned yourself, you're still kind of new to this market. The data was one of the issues that was a stumbling block for you. The data is getting better. I mean, check out what our friends over there at Genesis Volatility have now, listeners. It's a great swath of data available over there for you. gvol.io. If you like all the data we're going to talk about in a few minutes, a lot of that comes from those folks over there. So gvol.io is the place to begin your Bitcoin and indeed ETH, any other major crypto derivatives analytical journey over there. But yeah, it has been fascinating to watch the evolution of this market, the evolution of the space, and your product. I mean, when last time we talked, it was still just a nascent index you were disseminating. It really went from 0 to 60 pretty quickly, Simon, because next time you're on the show, not only is it a real boy product, but you have your first trade, Simon. So walk us through how all this went from 0 to 60 so quickly, and then what was the trade that just went up?
Yeah, it was remarkable, even for me. So I'm typically an optimist, and I think I can get things done quickly, which is not, you know, usually that's not the case. But right now, we just had a really good set of circumstances. So we are quite close with the folks at LEDGERX, and at LEDGERX, they have a second or another sort of area where they are in charge of the market making. So they've got a market making arm within the LEDGERX, which is, for listeners who don't know, it's the only CFTC approved sort of crypto exchange in the US. So we started having conversations and saying, look, we've got this BITVOL index. It's now got a nice history. It's extremely, you know, it's updated 24/7, 365. Literally, there's virtually no downtime at all on this thing, and it spawned so many products. And we thought, well, what can we do about that? We have an index. Let's see if there's any interest. So the market maker we have was willing to put a price on it, and we had a customer who, you know, they don't want to sort of be named, but, you know, these people are a major sort of player in the crypto macro space. So we consummated a trade. I mean, we basically, they got together and figured out what it is that they would like to do. It after all is a test trade, but it's proven to be it's proven that it can be done. And we did it OTC. And as I mentioned, I think I may have mentioned earlier, but no, if I didn't, we're going to be trying to get it listed at some point on LEDGERX as well. So no, it's a really fortuitous start. Extremely excited about having a trade on it. It's ironic because the index itself, whilst it's been around for a year, there hasn't been anybody bought a future or sold a future on it, but we've already done a call spread on it, which is quite bizarre.
You kind of put the cart before the horse. You got the calls going before you even have the underlying going. So I tip my hat to you, sir. Only in the world of crypto could we see this rapid degree of acceleration, sir.
Yeah, I agree. It's so fertile and everybody's really keen to do stuff. It's really an exciting space.
I mean, look at what CME did. They launched their futures and then kind of watched them grow for over 2 years before they finally got around to launching the options. They let it cook for a long time. That's CME, listen, that's a very big player before they even thought about listing options, let alone getting some trades done in them. And so Simon decided to just bypass all of that. Go straight to the options, sir. Well done for you.
Thank you.
That does kind of speak to the different nature of the markets we're talking about here, the crypto space. And a lot of it is different. We talk about hourly open interest and all these interesting things in the crypto options that you just can't do in the world of traditional options yet, even though they do so much more volume and so much more size and are so much more liquid, yet they don't have these basic functionality tweaks that we see available. That's kind of happens when you're building a marketplace from scratch outside of regulation. Sometimes you see some of these interesting upgrades and tweaks, and also things can proceed a little bit faster. And the folks at LEDGERX willing to take the risk. The market maker, they deserve a bit of a tip of the cap too, being able to step up and make the trade happen. We know it went up OTC, so that's a little bit of effort and risk on their part. So yeah, fascinating stuff all around. And I think you broke it down for us really quickly, but let's break down what the trade actually was. It was a 1x2, was it not?
It was, that's right. So it was a 1x2. The numbers are going to boggle people's minds, but basically there was a 1x2. They bought the 1 times and sold higher up strikes 2 times. And the strikes were 135 and 150. Bear in mind, that's vol, right? It's not spot. It's 150 vol. So quite astonishing. And the trade expires in March. So there are 2 main cycles, but the predominant cycle is that options in this space expire at 8 a.m. UTC, which is London time, effectively, on the last Friday of every month. That's when the standard expiration. We are also introducing another one, which is the Wednesday 9:30, which is the third Wednesday of every month at 9:30, because guess what? That aligns with spikes and VIX. So people will be able to do BITVOL contracts versus VIX or spikes contracts. And I think that will have some appeal.
Yeah, it certainly was. It's one thing we talked about a lot, and we'll get to it in a little bit when we start breaking down all the data, is how the crypto world on the options front just seems to love a nice quarterly option, a quarterly expiration, but providing more expirations, more cycles. We're starting to see more volume, more OI trickle into the weeklies out there. So lining some of these up more with some of the more standard expirations. A lot of the crypto options expire at a weird time at the end of the month. That doesn't really line up with the way traditional options expire on the third Friday or Thursday for the indices. So there's a lot of things that have to be done to bring these markets in line, but it is fascinating to watch. Also interesting, they did the 1x2. So they have naked short units to the upside in volatility, which, if you watch Bitcoin, that could easily go against you pretty quickly, Simon.
Absolutely. I mean, if your listeners don't have any access, we have a website called t3index.com, and in there you can go to the BITVOL section. You can see that recently, when there was that first big run up in Bitcoin and Ethereum, it got to over 200 in the Ethereum vol. So yeah, so it can move. This thing moves like pretty much nothing else. It's incredible.
Yeah, ETH has led the dance for a little bit. Bitcoin kind of catching up a little bit these days as ETH has come off a little bit. You can check it out for yourselves, like you mentioned, listeners. T3index.com. He has the BITVOL front and center on the homepage these days. Kind of hard to blame him. That's where a lot of the mind share is right now. Looks like it's at about a 106 and change, almost 107. Simon, is that where we're hanging out right now in BITVOL?
Yes, correct. That's right.
So you can check that out for yourselves, listeners. Over there, T3 Index, it's disseminated for free. And hopefully we'll see more options, more interesting developments upcoming in the near future. Speaking of developments, there have been one or two since our last show in the world of Bitcoin. Of course, the more infamous, the more headline making is that Bitcoin blowing past the 60,000 strike since our last show. You know, Simon, you and I were talking, I think it was on our last appearance, about how ridiculous it seemed that someone was loading up on January expiration 30,000 strike options back in October. That seemed outlandish. That's half of what we are now. So, I mean, that seems relatively calm and tranquil by comparison now, because again, blowing past the 60,000 strike up to 61,500 or so in that level out there. That was on Saturday before coming off again pretty hard, dropping back down to a little bit shy of the 55,000 level. Actually, it was about 54,000 and change. Let's see where it is coming into. Yeah, it's bounced back up to about 56,000. That still puts it Bitcoin up since our last show, because our last show listeners, we were at about a 51,300. So that puts it up coming into the start of the show, almost 5,000 points, 49.51 since our last show, listeners. So quite the run, quite the swing, quite the range. Again, translating into why someone might be speculating on levels north of 135% volatility out there in Bitcoin. Speaking of that Bitcoin vol, let's get into that. Again, all this data coming at you courtesy of our friends over there at Genesis Volatility Land. The 1 hour volatility, again, this is a nice metric you get in the Bitcoin space. You don't really see disseminated much else in the traditional vol landscape. The 1 hour volatility, I like that. It's last show, it was about a 91.5%. So still very volatile, but below the 100% level. Now we're up to about 90, almost 100, 98.5%. If we go into the Genesis thing, we can see how high that spike got over the course of the past week here. It got up to, on the 13th, we got up to 103.66. So it did spike, pun intended, Simon, ever so briefly above the triple digit level, then came back off of it. So it seems like our friend there who was buying the 135 strike, it's got a little bit of a ways to go before that one starts making some sense. In terms of the 1 hour skew, that 30-20 skew, looking at all the options from the 30 delta down to the 20 delta on both the call wing and the put wing. And again, if what I said to you is Greek, check out our options educations program, options bootcamp, and options playbook radio. They will help you out immensely. Our last show, that skew was about 1.8. This show coming in has moved quite a bit, up to about 7.5 right now. And in terms of OI, again, something fascinating we can do, Simon, in the crypto world that we can't in the traditional options world. We can talk about hourly changes in open interest. That would be so nice to see in the traditional world of options. But that hourly OI has spiked up, again, pun intended, since our last show. It was at about 184,000 on our last show. Now it's about 201,000. So we're seeing ever increasing open interest out there. In terms of notional open interest, which is how the crypto world tends to like to disseminate its OI. Not my favorite measure, but again, I'll allow it here on the show because a lot of things can distort a notional measure. Listen, that's why it's not my favorite. But on the last show, we were right around 11 billion in terms of notional open interest. That's the value of all the outstanding contracts out there. And coming into today's show is right around 14 billion. So quite a big increase since our last show. DEREBIT still the big dog with about 12 billion of that 14 billion. But other outlets have really come on board aggressively. We've got OKEX and BIT.com kind of fighting it out for number 2. OKEX just barely edging them out, 562 million for number 2. BIT.com right behind them, 558 million for number 3. Then we got CME all the way down at number 4 now with 408 million. LEDGERX holding firm there, the aforementioned LEDGERX. I think they'll come back up again later on. We have a listener question about them. 345 million. Then there's all the rest. You've got your Huobi, 18 million. And you're BAKKT, unfortunately, still at a whopping 0. Simon, I know you're starting to pay more attention to all things Bitcoin volatility, obviously, because it's near and dear to your heart right now. Any of those metrics I just broke down, the hourly vol, the skew, the OI, perhaps lighting up your tape over there at T3 Index, sir?
Well, I mean, the data that you've put forward is kind of consistent with what we've seen. And I think really the key takeaway for me is just the innovation that goes on in this space. I think that's why it's so exciting to people as well. You know, it's not your traditional product, and they offer a huge range of other things. So, for example, you know, overnight options, 1 week options. There is a plethora of this kind of stuff that is just not as easy to access in sort of staid or traditional exchange structure, where they can't really accommodate for those kinds of things. So I think that also appeals to a lot of people as well, just the propensity of different products that are out there, and we're talking about options and so on, but you've also got perpetual futures contracts, which are the big dog of the market itself, and we haven't even really sort of talked about that either. So yeah, there's just so much going on and there's so much innovation. It's quite an exciting space.
Yeah, the perpetual stuff is kind of fascinating. Again, a little bit different from the traditional futures space as well. Let's keep our focus on the options for now. We'll get to futures in a second. The OI out there, calls versus puts from a Bitcoin perspective. Calls have traditionally led the dance when it comes to open interest in Bitcoin option lists. That is still the case, even though puts have continued to come on strong, and maybe last week's market activity perhaps giving some weight to that. We rallied all the way up and came down again pretty heavily. So might be an argument for a few puts in your back pocket here. There we are, of course, at still stratospheric levels of valuation out there these days. So coming into today's show, calls are at 108,000 contracts open, up about 9,000 versus the puts at 98,000. So right behind them, they're up about 11,000 out there. In terms of volume on the week, let's go out to the biggest, most active platform, which is still DEREBIT. Remember, they had about 12 billion worth of the notional OI outstanding as of today. And a decent week volume-wise. You might think all the big swings would have translated into some really aggressive days worth of volume, and not so much, at least from a notional volume perspective. Again, we saw big spikes recently up to 1.8 billion on the 23rd of February, 1.7 billion on 19th of. We didn't really get that close to that this week. We got 1.1 billion on the 13th. Today, coming into today's show, we might be getting there today. We'll see, because coming into today's show is at about 1.1 billion already. So as it stands, they may be closing in on that. 1.2 billion on the 10th. The 11th was the closest we got, about 1.4 billion out there. So that was a pretty active day. But again, we're not really surpassing the recent highs we hit out there. Overall, I guess if you compare it back to early January, when 1.5 billion was a lot, that's the first time we really hit that. Then I guess compared to that, it was a pretty steady week in terms of most of the days were north of 1 billion in terms of OI. In terms of where the interest is lining up, where you folks are lining up your trades. Simon, this kind of gets back to what I was saying before. The crypto options, they just love a quarterly. It's also the case in ETH, but it's very much the case right now in Bitcoin. March is the big dog by an order of magnitude. I mean, it's 93,000 contracts open in the traditional monthly March contract. That's up 8,000 from last week, and it dwarfs everything else on this chart. The closest behind it is June, looks like, with about 30,000 contracts. Then you have some of the weeklies doing some paper, but it's still pretty much all quarterlies. DECE, almost 20,000 contracts open. So it's pretty much all quarterlies. Is that kind of what you've been finding in your analysis as well, Simon? Is that maybe just the way the liquidity lines up, what the customers are up to? Either way, for some reason, Bitcoin options tend to just love a quarterly contract, sir, and eschew everything else.
Yeah, I think this is fairly natural. I mean, if you look at most markets, they tend to congregate, and in some of them it's forced. So if you go to an exchange, obviously they don't have the complete range of strikes. You've only got, it's not as granular. So no, that doesn't surprise me at all, because I mean, ultimately, with people wanting to buy and sell options, they want to do so in a node that is liquid enough, rather than, as I said earlier, just it's not tongue in cheek, but you do have overnight options, 1 week options. But the reality is that if you want to do a proper trade and you want to hold it for a period of time, typically people will look at those monthly contracts. So that doesn't surprise me, even though it's in the crypto space. I think the same sort of issues apply.
Yeah, for now at least, it seemed like if you want to get a trade off, look into the quarterlies, because that's where the deepest, most liquid markets are lurking out there. Let's look to where the action is from a strike perspective. We've been saying for a while, there's some interesting strikes afoot in both Bitcoin and in ETH. And we'll start off here, obviously, with Bitcoin. The 40,000 strike remains the number one strike with about 16,000 contracts open. That's still far and away the number one by almost double anything else out there. And that's about unched. It hasn't really changed much since our last show. So a lot of people haven't been taking things off at the 40,000 strike, even though if you're long calls on that strike, you're effectively long, a future now. It's pretty deep in the money. Less so than it was, let's say, on Saturday, but still. a fairly deep in the money contract. Number 2, far behind that, is the 48,000 strike. That has about 9,700. That's kind of come on the radar a little bit more since our last show. And then we got the 20,000 strike, number 3, with about 9,100. Again, that one's pretty much unched as well. So the top 3 haven't changed a heck of a lot over the course of the last couple of weeks, actually. And then we got number 4, actually, those two are, if you look at the 20,000 strike and 48,000, they're so close, you can kind of maybe say they're tied for number 2. And then you got the 44,000 strike coming right behind them with about 8,300. And then we got a tie for number 4. You like these strikes, Simon. The 80,000 and 100,000 strikes are now tied for effectively number 4 overall in sizable open positions in Bitcoin option listeners. They both have about exactly 7,700 contracts each. I know, Simon, even the last time you were on the show, did you ever think we'd be talking with a straight face, not jokingly, about size open interest on the 80,000 and 100,000 strikes in Bitcoin, sir?
Not at all. No way. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. I was contemplating, should I buy some Bitcoin? And I think it was 20,000. And of course I didn't. And so, I'm left here with my pants down around my knees. But basically, it doesn't surprise me at all. There's so much interest in this thing. It's remarkable.
Yeah, that's why we hope that a lot of these markets we're talking about here, the crypto options market, really start to take off, because for a lot of people, you're right. It was at 20,000 when you were looking at it. It's still an extraordinarily expensive product by just about any frame of reference. The vol, if you go out to the futures, the margins are high. We'll talk about that a little bit later out there. So it's not exactly an easy or inexpensive product to invest. That's why it would have been so nice to have more options available, pun intended, as this product rallied from sub $1 all the way to $60,000. The fact that we haven't really had many deep liquid options off, especially for here in the U.S. You guys over there at Sydney, you can go sling on DEREBIT till the cows come home. You're loving that. But for people here in the U.S., which is, of course, the bulk of our audience, they've had very few options, pun intended. So it would have been nice to see a few more, because that would have been a much more inexpensive, much more reasonable way for people to participate on this explosive rally, particularly what we've seen over the past 6 months out there in Bitcoin. Let's go on out to the big dog now, see what's trading over there on CME land. A decent week overall for the futures, if not blown the doors off. 11,000 contracts on the tape today. Friday was almost the same, about 10,500. Thursday about 9,000, Wednesday about 8,000, Tuesday about 7,000, and Monday about 9,000. So that's kind of your baseline, what you expect out there. Wasn't light, but it wasn't blowing the doors off either. Options, similar story. Not a lot of paper throughout most of the week. Today, a decent paper, though. Again, that swing moving. Getting about 76 contracts out there today. Friday was the biggest day of the week with 84 contracts. Most of the rest of the days of the week under 50. Again, that's not that much, but also it's a very big, very meaty 5x multiplier out there on an underlying that's trading around $60,000. So 84 contracts is actually a lot more than it sounds like out there. I mean, talking again, going back to that notional value thing that we're always talking about in the crypto space. So it'd be nice. I think we'll have a listener mentioning this a little later. It'd be nice to see maybe some smaller bite-sized contracts in that space to open the floodgates to more people, but interesting stuff nonetheless. Not that much interesting going on in the world of BAKKT futures. They did about 1,078 according to the last update on the BAKKT volume bot. That was actually about unched from the last previous session they highlighted. And again, a far cry from their all-time high of a little bit shy of 19,000. That was back on September 17th of last year. So it wasn't that long ago they were doing nearly 20,000 contracts. These days, not so much. Everyone's kind of just waiting, I think, for BAKKT to maybe do their IPO, whatever it is that's going to budge these markets and get some action out there. Speaking of all things action, there's been a lot going on in the world of altcoin too. So let's get to it as we explore the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the altcoin universe. This is, of course, a portion of the show. We break down what's going on outside of the big dog, which is Bitcoin, except for here when we're breaking down the overall top 10. And of course, Bitcoin is still the big dog. That ridiculous valuation. We'll get to that in a second. By the way, as I mentioned on the last show, take these and every show really, take these overall market caps with a huge grain of salt. There's a lot of fluff, shall we say, that goes into calculating these, but the rankings, I think, have a lot of value. Number 10 is Chainlink. I don't see Doge here, listeners, so Doge has been bumped out of the top 10 yet again. Chainlink, good for about 11.25 billion worth of market cap. Number 9, Litecoin, still holding in there at the top 10, 13.3 billion. Number 8, Uniswap. The bottom half of the top 10 has been fascinating to watch of late. Uniswap, number 8, 15.5 billion. Number 7, all the way down, number 7, XRP, a little bit shy, just a tick shy of 20 billion. Number 6, Polkadot, so that's usurping XRP now at about 31, almost 32 billion. Number 5, it's Cardano, 33 billion, pretty much even. Number 4, Tether, 38.5 billion. Number 3, Binance Coin, kind of lurking in there at 39.5 billion. Number 2, you know what it is. It's ETH, 203 billion. That means the big dog is still the big dog. It is Bitcoin. At the time of this was run, listeners, was at 56,000. That puts it just north of the 1T, the 1 trillion market cap. Again, a level we were joking about not too long ago on the show. We did a poll. What's going to hit the 1T level first, Tesla or Bitcoin? Now they've joined forces, so all bets are off, but still. Musk has certainly contributed a lot to that 1 billion. I think we have a listener question a little bit later about Musk's latest dalliances in the crypto space. We'll get to that in a little bit. First, let's go out to the number 2 cryptocurrency out there. That's ETH. Kind of a net quiet week after swinging around a little bit. Show to show, it's only up a little over 3 handles, about 3.2 handles. Was that a 1776 on our last show? 1779 coming into the start of this show. So net show to show, not a lot going on, even though in between a little bit more action over there. Vol-wise, Simon was talking about how ETH got a little bit north, threatening 200 not too long ago. ETH has been a little bit structurally more volatile than Bitcoin, and it's still up there, even though they're much closer now than they were. Remember, Bitcoin was just threatening to break the triple-digit level. On our last show, ETH was at 106% from a 1-hour vol perspective, and this show at about 110.5% out there. SKEW-wise, 30-20 SKEW in ETH. We're seeing the last show was about an 8.7 coming into today's show, about a 2.7. Simon, you touched on ETH vol earlier. It has been structurally more volatile, so that's kind of been a fascinating one to watch. You guys cooking up an ETH vol trade anytime in the near future? Am I going to see it print in the next week, given your rapid pace of development, sir?
I highly doubt that, unfortunately. So that was, that was kind of a showstopper, the other one. But this one, look, I think it'll take a little bit longer. I think probably we ought to get a few more trades going in the BITVOL first, I would imagine, before the ETH vol. The ETH is just, when stuff happens, it's just that much more volatile. So I think we probably want to lay down some groundwork in the BITVOL first, I would imagine.
That's far too rational and reasonable. So you got to launch all the products at once, sir, and let them all just live and die on the vine. That's how it's done in the proper product world, right? All right, what's going on here from a volume perspective this week? Again, similar to what we saw in Bitcoin, decent volume, actually a little bit lighter out here in ETH this week. So yeah, overall kind of a lighter volume week out here. The biggest day we saw was 167 million worth of notional. Today, coming into the show, was only about a little north of 107 million. That's a far cry from what we saw not too long ago, the 23rd of February, almost 400 million worth of notional trading on DEREBIT. That was a new high, 286 million on the 19th, 264 million on the 4th, just the beginning of the year here in January. So we have seen many days north of 200 million and some north of 300, closing in on 400 million. Nothing quite like that this past week, roughly half of that, if not less. So a little bit quieter time on the ETH front. OI, though, is looking a little bit stronger. ETH OI is ticking up on both sides. The calls up to about 830,000 contracts, puts them up 16,000 contracts from last week. And that puts 646,000 contracts. They're up 16,000 as well. So net both growing the same amount, which means that they're kind of staying equidistant to each other. And that puts a little bit behind the calls compared to what we're seeing out there in Bitcoin land. Not as much put action, which again, this thing has rallied, but maybe just the astronomical levels that Bitcoin has reached is driving a little bit more put action out there. Hourly open interest, again, a little bit higher than our last show. Last show was 1.41 million. Today, coming into showtime at about 1.46 million. And looking at where the trades are lining up, once again, It is still March. The quarterly is the big dog with over 500,000 contracts open, 556,000 contracts. That's up about 18,000 from last week. And it's kind of pinning the needle on this chart. Nothing else is even close. You got June almost at 300, not quite at 300,000 contracts. So that's kind of threatening. And you have December a little bit north of 200, like about 250, maybe 225,000 contracts out there. Those are the two closest. Nothing else is even really legible on the chart. So that shows how far ahead March is in terms of everything. It also shows a lot of OI is going to roll off the board at March expiration, listeners, coming up in a couple of weeks. So it'll be interesting to see how that impacts things. ETH tends to have these big fits and starts with huge chunks of OI coming off at regular intervals there. So kind of fascinating to watch how that plays out. Yet again, in terms of where the action is, Simon, this is kind of interesting and has been for some time. I talked about some deep in the money strikes on Bitcoin options being open. The number one strike in ETH has been and remains the 400 strike. It has about 83,000 contracts open there. That number has kind of been unched for over a month now. It hasn't really budged. That remains far and away the number one size strike in ETH. So clearly the hodlers are playing there because they are over 1,000 points in the money at this point. And they have no signs, it seems like, of taking those off. Number two, we've got the 1,600 strike. So that actually has a little bit more relevant strike. Nice to see a strike that's within 100 or so points of where it's trading, actually lighting up the charts a little bit. That's up to 71,000 contracts. It's up about 10,000 from last week. So that one has grown to surpass the number three spot. That is another tie we have between the 320 strike and the 480 strike, both around 67,000 contracts, both of them unchanged this week. So Simon, are you surprised that there are still a huge preponderance of positions that are deep, deep in the money, A, and B, show no sign of changing anytime soon, Simon?
Well, I mean, if you're a Bitcoin or a crypto aficionado, you think it's going up. So they're deeply in the money. I certainly understand that. If I were them, I'd probably have some sort of stop loss put in place, but you're not going to know that from that data. So yeah, it doesn't really surprise me to hear that they're hanging on.
Yeah, the hodlers are out in force, and when they put those options on, maybe that was the at-the-money strike at the time, and ETH has clearly rallied since then, and they're deciding to hold on to it. It gets to this point, it's effectively like holding the underlyings, like holding the futures, listeners. It's so far in the money, but it'll be interesting to see if they start taking those off eventually out there. Let's move on out to some other altcoin that are lighting it up. We've got Ripple down almost 4 cents from our last show, so down about the 43 cent and change level after bouncing up north, getting up to the almost 48 cent level on our last show. We've also got Bitcoin Cash up about 8.5 points from our last show. Bitcoin SV up about 4.5 points. And unfortunately for all you Doge lovers, Doge is down since our last show, down a whopping 0.0018. The price action in Doge just fascinates me to no end. Simon, I guess the question I have for you is, when are we going to see the Doge Vol index, sir?
Yeah, I think that'll be for someone else to do. Yeah.
No Doge Vol coming at T3. You're going to focus on the milkshake for the time being?
Possibly, yeah.
All right, and we're going to focus on your questions. It's time to answer them. It's time for the crypto question segment.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
All right, everybody, welcome to the crypto questions. You guys have a lot of questions for us. Sometimes we turn the spotlight back on you in this segment as well with some interesting audience polls. On our last show, we were kind of just paying off the poll we asked you guys. We asked you last week, do you think we need a Bitcoin ETF to really make Bitcoin reach the mainstream here in the U.S.? Obviously, this is all based on the U.S. audience. I know we've seen some approvals for ETFs in Canada and other places, but still in the U.S., not so much. And our audience, actually, we took a different tilt with that question. We said, do you think we'll see a Bitcoin ETF approved and indeed launched in the U.S. in 2021? Our audience was decidedly optimistic, Simon. Nearly 60%, 59.6% saying yes, 18.2% saying no, and the rest, 22.2% saying they just wanted some Bitcoin options. I'm with you on the latter. More Bitcoin options, I think, will help everyone here. Our poll question this week, Simon, is a little bit more up your alley. We're asking everybody, lots of people are out there talking about volatility, saying this product is volatile, this product is volatile, but which product actually holds the crown for the most volatile? I have a feeling you might have some thoughts on this, Simon. We gave our audience 4 choices. We said, which one of these products has the highest 30-day volatility right now as of this morning when this poll went live? And we said, no cheating. Use your gut. What does your gut instinct tell you? Don't go on your brokerage platform and pull up the 30-day at the money implied vol for all these different products. That's no fun. We want you to use your gut list. And we gave you 4 choices. Tesla, a product that is often synonymous with volatility. Bitcoin, also another one that is synonymous with volatility. There was a whole episode of that Silicon Valley show that the whole plot was that Bitcoin is volatile. That was the entire plot of the show. VIX, so volatility itself, and GameStop, the king of the memes, at least for right now. Simon, our audience right now seems to be running away with with meme love. 71.7% coming into Showtime saying it was GameStop. Tesla number 2, 15.1%. Bitcoin number 3, that kind of surprising me, 13.2%. And so far, at least, no love for VIX itself. Mr. Simon, you've crunched a few vol numbers in your day. What are your thoughts on our poll? And also, B, what are your thoughts on the way our audience is leaning?
Yeah, it's truly fascinating. I'm surprised. I mean, VIX for me has got to be the lowest, I would say. Then Bitcoin, and then it's a toss-up between Tesla and GameStop. I'd probably go Tesla, GameStop. How wrong is that?
So Tesla first and then GameStop?
Yes.
Okay. I can't reveal yet, Simon, because our poll is still live. Okay. I don't want to muddy the waters out there, but it is fascinating to watch what is going on. I'll just say, listen to what our Spikes father is saying here. He knows a thing or two about volatility. Is he right? I don't know. Is he wrong? I don't know. I can't say. But interesting stuff. You guys also have interesting stuff afoot. This is an interesting one, Simon, given the fact that you're on the show with us today. This comment/question comes in from Bronson Brower. He says, "Hi, Mark. I've been listening to your podcast, specifically the crypto rundowns, and I always hear you talking about how there isn't a good option for crypto options trading in the U.S. Have you checked out LEDGERX? I don't work for the company, but I have been selling out of the money calls there for a few months, and it has gone well so far. The spreads are fairly large and not a ton of liquidity, but I have been able to scalp some premium the last few months. As a holder since 2013, oh, good for you. It's great to see some premium on the stack I've been holding. Just thought I would toss that out there in case you weren't aware of them. Keep up the good work." Well, thank you for that, Bronson. We are indeed aware of LEDGERX, as Simon's presence here will indicate. But we have had LEDGERX on the show multiple times outside of Simon's appearances. I mean, he's not officially a LEDGERX representative, but he does put up his products over there, as he just broke down at the top of the show. We've also had their earlier CEO on, or actually, I think co-CEO at the time, on, and we're working on getting them back on again, because you're right. They are the only other real game in town for U.S. customers outside of CME, and CME is still kind of a bit of a beefy beast for a lot of our listeners out there. So you're right. LEDGERX does offer. So I haven't actually had a chance to play with them myself, but I have been planning on opening up an account there just to kind of see what liquidity we're talking about and how things are trading out there. But Simon, you're pretty intimately familiar with what's going on over there from a LEDGERX perspective. What are your thoughts on what Bronson has to say and how maybe some folks might want to check them out?
Yeah, look, I think the timing is perfect for Bronson. I'm glad that he's sort of giving them a go. As I said, I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but we are sort of working on a couple of projects together, so we're certainly familiar with each other. They have had an outstanding run recently, I believe, as a function of a few things going on. For example, the shutdown of BitMEX, more or less. That was probably one of the exchanges around the world, and more people want to go to a regulated venue, especially sort of in the US. So I think that they're already profiting from that, and I think that they will continue to do that. I think they'll become the dominant player in the US.
There's some interesting stuff. It is right, a little bit more bite-sized, which I think will appeal to a lot of the listeners of this program who maybe just aren't interested or can't afford or don't want to tie up all the capital in the CME one. So they are interesting. We are working on bringing them back on the show. Check out our archives, Bronson and everyone else, because we have had them on the show in the past. So we are aware of them. We do know they exist. They weren't doing a lot of volume, as Simon says, until a little bit more recently. So they've come back on our radar in a more interesting fashion. And outside of CME, they're kind of the only game in town for a lot of our U.S. listeners. So if you do want to take a bite of that apple, this underlying is moving around so much that it's hard to argue against looking at some options out there. And the more people look at it, the more trades it gets out there. Of course, the tighter those markets will become, which is good for everybody. Speaking of something similar in terms of the bite-sized nature of contracts, or maybe not so much, this one comes in from Hawkeye FX. He wrote to us and he wanted to copy CME on it. He says, when is CME going to have micro and mini Bitcoin contracts? The time is now, he says. A margin on your regular Bitcoin futures is way too high. Yeah, this is an issue we talked about before. These are pretty beefy contracts. They're 5x multipliers. The underlying is 50 to 60 odd thousand recently. So it's pretty expensive. And of course, you mentioned the margin. That's something that CME really had to really increase to get the CFTC to go on with really launching the futures back in the day, because they kind of deemed it as a pretty volatile asset even back then in 2017. So they really had to tie up a lot of margin. They made it expensive to come in and, let's say, short the futures over there at CME. And that was done for a reason. They tried to really tamp down a lot of the excessive speculation that was going on out there in this product. So you're right. They are an expensive product from an underlying perspective, from a multiplier perspective, and from a margin perspective. So I've asked them this. I've asked Tim McCourt, who runs the crypto product suite over there at CME, on our TWIFO program, this exact question multiple times. When are we going to see some sort of bite-sized thing? They've kind of demurred to, hey, we're launching ETH right now. They did launch Ether futures, so that's got some traction on it. I do think they're not blind. They see the trends even on their own exchange. I mean, they launched micro equity index futures a year and change ago, and those things have been the most successful product in the history of CME. So they see the trend. They know that smaller is bigger right now, particularly with this explosion of the one lot, the Robinhood, the small retail accounts out there. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see more of this. I haven't heard anything yet. What are your thoughts, Simon? You think it's the size of the contract, or as he also points out here, the margin that is keeping so many people away from the CME Bitcoin options?
Yeah, I think it's probably a combination of both, because also the higher the Bitcoin and other altcoins go up, obviously the more expensive they become as well. So, and it's not trivial. I mean, as we discussed earlier in the show, I was looking at Bitcoin originally at 20,000, which was, late to the game. And now look where it is, right? So yeah, I think these are real concerns for people. And a lot of people are just not going to have the capital necessary to be able to participate. So I think it's imperative that they issue or release a smaller version.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to watch when and if they actually do launch that, just how much traction that's going to get, because that will really open the floodgates to a lot of people out there. All right, we got deluge with questions these days, understandably so. We'll squeeze in a few more here. Marcus wants to know, do you have any updates on approval for more Bitcoin options exchanges or products in the U.S. this year? Well, this kind of gets back to our Bitcoin ETF poll from earlier. Our audience thinks one of those is going to be approved this year. I haven't seen that much flexibility on that front. Obviously, we have a new administration coming into office at the beginning of this year. Whenever that happens, that tends to gum up the works in terms of people have to get appointed to these positions at the different regulatory agencies. That takes a while, particularly in a pandemic year. There's other priorities out there right now. So that's kind of gumming up the works a little bit. So all that a long way around to saying I have not heard any sort of inclination that more Bitcoin options exchanges are going to get approved in the U.S. anytime soon, or any types of products relevant to that audience. Outside of Simon's cool OTC trade, that was pretty cool. But outside of stuff like that, I don't see any. Unfortunately, it still seems like LEDGERX and CME for the U.S. audience are still kind of the only games in town from an options perspective right now. All right, we'll wrap it up with this one. It's kind of a silly one. This comes from JLS. He wants to know, what do you think of Elon Musk adding TECHNOKING of Tesla to his 8K filing? Yeah, this news just came out this morning. Musk, they just like to make headlines over there. They like to do this kind of stuff. It's really synonymous of nothing, but on the other hand, synonymous of what they like to do over there at Tesla. They like to stir the pot a little bit. So he didn't put this on his Twitter handle like he has in the past, listeners, with Doge and whatever else. He put this in it. They put this in an 8K filing with the SEC, saying effective March 15th, 2021, the titles of Elon Musk and Zach Kirkhorn, who have changed to TECHNOKING of Tesla and Master of Coin, respectively. They will also, in case you're worried, they will also maintain their respective positions as CEO and Chief Financial Officer. So on the one hand, it's silly, kind of fun. On the other hand, not the kind of thing you expect to see in official filings, the kind of thing that tends to get the institutional crowd a little bit maybe spooked that there's some weird stuff going on. There's maybe a bit of an aberrant hand at the tiller. Look what he went on the Joe Rogan podcast, and that really seemed to spook a lot of people. So I don't know if this is the proper venue for it, but I don't know what Tesla stock is doing today. You'll have to pull it up to see if they like it or not, but it is indicative of kind of it's up a little bit, not much, a little bit today, about 1.5%, which for Tesla is nothing. So fascinating stuff. I don't know, Simon, anything to add on this kind of ridiculous headline? Musk yet again inserting himself and Tesla into the Bitcoin conversation, sir?
Well, I mean, this guy's such an amazing dude. He can kind of do whatever he wants and get away with it. So I'm surprised he didn't call himself 420 or something like that. But yeah, it's an amusing distraction, I think, and it's not that bad. Very different.
Not that bad. I like it. There you go. We'll leave it with that. Not that bad. Unfortunately, listeners, that music means we've come to the end of another gloriously fun episode of Through the World of Crypto. We touched on the massive swings and moves, the new price action out there in Bitcoin, the extreme highs, 61,000, the lows coming thereafter, 54,000. We touched on all the volume, the volatility, Simon's new Bitcoin trade. We ended it on more madness in the Musk and Tesla realm. So we covered a lot of territory on the show today. But before we go, Simon, we touched on at the top of the show all things BITVOL. But if folks are interested, they want to learn more, maybe they want to start slinging some BITVOL for themselves sometime down the road, where should they go? What should they do to get the journey started, sir?
To get a sense of the indices that we've got, you can look at t3index.com, and if you go into the index section, you'll find both the BITVOL contract and Ethereum. If that piques your interest, then we're basically trying to move ahead as quickly as possible to try and grow the OTC space first. But of course, ultimately, we want to get this listed on the exchange, and we're working hard to get that done. So hopefully, that's not too far away. Let's say a couple of months, something like that.
There you go. A feather in your cap. Check it out for yourself. Listeners, has got, of course, BITVOL. Also got Spikes, a.k.a. a VIX analog out there. You got the milkshake for all of you who like to sling or perhaps track some volatility in the dairy space, and a whole bunch more over there at t3index.com. And as I mentioned to our listener here, what was the name there? Bronson. We are going to get the LEDGERX folks on the show to get a little bit more of a deep dive into what's going on their platform, why they put up this or help facilitate this OTC BITVOL trade, what's going on from a liquidity and a volume perspective in their options. As you see, they're climbing the ranks, getting a little bit more fascinating. So stay tuned for that. No concrete dates on that yet, but that'll be fascinating to look at, because outside of CME, they're kind of the only other game in town for a lot of you listeners out there who want to trade this stuff. And I don't blame you. The stuff moves. And speaking of stuff moves, these cryptocurrencies, they move, they swing hour by hour, minute by minute. Keep up on top of the latest developments. You know where to go. gvol.io is the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires. All the folks over there at Genesis Volatility doing cool stuff. And on behalf of them and Mr. Simon, and indeed myself, I thank all of you out there for downloading, streaming, subscribing, for sending in such great questions and comments. Keep it coming, for voting in all of our polls. We love you all. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Interview Tuesday, Wednesday. For a lot of you, very important Education Wednesday. Get you up to speed on all these crazy things we call options with Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook Radio. Back again on Thursday, episode 2 of the Option Block, and This Week in Futures Options. Friday, back with volatility views. Then it all kicks off again on Monday with another episode of the Crypto Rundown.
This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVOL, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVOL analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions@theoptionsinsider.com.